This is a reading of chapter 23 in Lester Sumrall's book, My Story to His Glory. Chapter 23 is entitled, The Island Metropolis in Need of a Church. God continued to bless our work in South Bend, but I could not reconcile myself to the fact that my ministry for God was to be confined to a local congregation. The church had given its blessings to my travel in the past, and now once again I left for Hong Kong with Gordon Lindsay, Christ for the Nations, and Morris Cirillo to conduct crusades on this great island metropolis. You will remember that Howard Carter and I spent a brief time in Hong Kong many years earlier on our trips into mainland China. Now the doors into China were closed, and I had the strong feeling that if only a church could be established in Hong Kong, this church could be a lighthouse when the doors into China once again swung open. I went to my knees about this. Lord, do you want us to start a church as we did in Manila? Did you want us to help train the Chinese here in Hong Kong so they will be ready to go into mainland China when the time is ripe? Just about this time, A.C. Valdez, the evangelist who held the first citywide crusade for us in Manila, came to me and encouraged me to begin such a work in Hong Kong, the hub of the Orient. After much fasting and prayer, and talking this over with Louise, we both felt that God was directing us in this new venture of faith. In 1959, I resigned my pastorate in South Bend for the second time and moved my family to Hong Kong into an apartment on the side of Victoria Peak. Frank was 12 years old, Stephen 9, and Peter 6. I was 46. In downtown Hong Kong, we bought the fourth floor of a new office building located on the waterfront adjacent to the post office. Amazingly, in the same building, the Communist Party occupied the seventh floor, the Roman Catholics had the third floor, and many other organizations and businesses shared the remainder of the building. We converted our floor into an auditorium that would seat about 300 people and named it New Life Timpai. We were helped by a half-dozen men from Hong Kong chapter of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International and began 69 charter members, including some who had come forward at one of our crusades prior to making our move and had given their hearts to the Lord. Our congregation was made up primarily of people who had fled from southern part of China when the communists took over. Over half the people in Hong Kong were refugees. People were constantly trying to reach Hong Kong from the Chinese mainland, some of them making it by swimming from the Kwangtung coast of southern China. We had a congregation of people who knew what sorrowing and suffering were. They knew what it meant to be persecuted, abused, and deprived. They clung to their freedom dearly. We ministered 3 times weekly to 3 totally dissimilar Chinese congregations. On Sunday mornings, the wealthiest upper-class people came. They needed Jesus too. On Sunday evenings, some of the poorest people I've ever seen came. These included the refugees. On Friday evenings, the small businessmen and their families worshipped with the boat people, those whose entire lives were spent afloat in a junk or sampan. But most importantly, God was in our midst, helping us to do that which was unusual for Hong Kong. Many miracles occurred, remarkable healings and conversions. Our main goal was to win men and women to Christ and to draw families to the Lord. New Life Temple didn't become as large as Bethel Temple in Manila, but it became a very strong evangelistic center that remains to this day, and it also became the mother church to a second congregation. In Hong Kong, we usually printed and distributed over 1 million books, tracts, and pamphlets in Chinese language that were distributed to Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Malaysia. Not only that, but we also shuttled the hour-and-a-half flight to Manila, where I was able to help with the work there. And during that time, we were able to start 3 more churches in the Philippines. We also found time in our rigorous schedule to conduct several revival meetings throughout the Orient, Malaysia, Java, Singapore, and Bangkok, and Thailand. Seeing the impact of the printed word gave impetus to starting World Harvest magazine, our official journal centered on the person of Jesus Christ, exalting him as mighty deliverance offered to all who will believe and accept him. I began to sense that it was time to establish a home base of operations. Our outreach now embraced crusade evangelism, literature outreach, and a growing interest in a radio ministry. Thus, it was that in April 1962, we moved back to South Bend to the property we had bought some years earlier. We bought an IBM typewriter, a printing press, and some second-hand mailing equipment. Then we hired a printer, a secretary, an editor, a mail clerk, and set about to publish the second issue of the World Harvest magazine. I had seen the results that could be achieved through the printing of literature. In 1944, my first book, Through Blood and Fire, had been published by Zondervan Publishing House. This was followed in 1948 by 50,000 Miles of Missionary Miracles, also published by Zondervan. Following that, several smaller books had been published. While in Hong Kong, I wrote and had published the book, Let Destroying Your Deadliest Enemy. I recognized that books, booklets, pamphlets, and tracts and magazines could often go where pastors, evangelists, missionaries, and writers of Christian literature cannot physically go. Surely this is one of the ways God would have us reach millions yet unreached for him. I said to my wife, Louise, we can have a world pulpit through the printed page.